Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please download future episodes on iTunes. But today, my guest is Patrick Ballin. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Jude. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Patrick, tell me about you.
Oh, where to start? Well, I've been working in executive coaching and team coaching for the last 10 or 11 years. I have a corporate background, so before that I was a senior manager working on international supply chain development at the Body Shop. And before that, I'm now on my third career, I had 15 years or so working in IT. Most of my work these days is either with corporates or increasingly it's with non-profits and charities, and that's an area that I really love to get involved.
I understand from just browsing your website and what you do a lot about collaboration. How do you feel collaboration works in terms of leadership?
Really good question. I think there are 3 different levels at which collaboration matters for leaders. The first is really to kibosh the myth of the solitary leader, the guy, and it usually is a guy, who's sort of on top of the organisation, sort of ploughing his furrow, leading the way, lonely at the top, and all of that stuff. Because the reality is, most people who are in leadership positions of any type, in any size or shape of organisation, have to have the support of the people around them, the people in their own organisation, and increasingly, and this leads on to the second and third areas where collaboration matters for leaders, increasingly also the support and engagement of all of the people in their organisation. So one of the other reasons that collaboration matters for leaders, as well as them having the help that they need to do the job they do, is that through good internal collaboration, by working well with other people, and sometimes that is as simple as having effective conversations that have a real impact, they can multiply the power of what any one individual can do many, many times. So when I go into organisations that have a poor collaboration culture, what I tend to see going on is silo working, people complaining they haven't got the information they need to do the job they do, finger pointing, blame, those sorts of things. And really good, effective collaboration, closing the gaps, has an immediate effect in terms of upping people's satisfaction at work, and probably more importantly for the organisations they work in, upping the performance. And I said there were 3 things. So the third thing that is more and more the case with the organisations I work in is, just like people are more networked inside their organisations and outside, that's also true of organisations. A friend of mine, Valerie Walk, who is a course leader at Ashridge Business School, got a great way of describing it. She describes this as leadership PQ, right? Political intelligence. These days, leaders have to be able to not only lead within their own organisation, they also have to be able to work with people outside their organisations, to influence across sectors, get buy-in from people who may be helpful to the decisions they're trying to make. That could be in government, for example, or it could be in local communities. And also, they have to be able to influence across sectors, because sometimes other organisations will be the ones with the resources that can make the things happen that they need to happen in their organisation. A very simple way in which you can think of that is supply chains. Supply chains without good collaboration are just suppliers constantly battling with customers. Supply chains with brilliant collaboration, well-led supply chains, have a degree of integration that enables really amazing things to happen. Products to flow smoothly to customers, amazing projects and innovations to happen, things to be done that no one organisation, no one leader, no one group of people could do on their own.
Oh, thanks for that. I think that really interests me because I feel like Socialised Mavericks really have collaboration as a default mode for them. They're always looking to collaborate. They're always looking to use their networks for the greater good. And it makes sense to me that you're saying that collaboration is the key to leadership, because I believe that the Socialised Mavericks really use their high ability to collaborate to shortcut things. So quite often it looks as if they're breaking the rules and they're not sticking to the set guidelines. And what they are really doing is jumping over those guidelines so they can actually collaborate with the next best person who can make the project work or influence other people. Is that something that you would see in your work?
Oh, absolutely. And I love the way you describe that as a default setting, because I think it is just what you just described as Socialised Mavericks. Do sort of naturally. They may not even realise it's what they do, but everybody else knows it's what they do. And they naturally, stick a socialised maverick, in a project, and that project will start gaining momentum because they will get on board all of the other people around the organisation. Classics. We just call it stakeholder management. But actually, I think for a socialised maverick, for a collaborative leader, all they're doing is what comes naturally then, which is getting other people on board, telling them what's going on, finding out what they need to know from those other people, naturally gaining their support. And the question they'd kind of ask when anybody asks, why are you doing that, is, surely that's just what you do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think Socialised Mavericks have a deep interest in other people. So whilst conformists will be, say, networking and saying, what do you do? And they're thinking about how that person can help them. The Socialised Maverick is scanning for connections. So they're asking quite deep questions and they're really listening to what the answers are so they can go, oh yeah, so that one, the key skill of that person is really problem solving and the key skill for that person is really this. And then they can make those connections. And other people miss that because they're looking for the transaction rather than the collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's one of the things when I see socialised mavericks at work in organisations and working in and with lots of different types of organisations. One of the things they seem to do just, again, naturally and really well is play to the strengths of the people who are around them. So rather than treat everybody as if they're just a resource who needs to be tasked with stuff, they will have a sense of this is what this person's really good at, this is what this person's real strengths are, this is the sort of thing that you probably don't ask this person to do, but you do ask that person to do. And it's very motivating for the people around them, and it's a great way of making sure that the resources as a whole get used well. And it's not soft and fluffy stuff, because actually the result is what they get is the best out of the people who are around them. If people actually then don't step up and do what they've asked, they are likely to get pretty concerned about that, because their default is, surely everybody just gives it their best, don't they? And surely once you've asked people and you've explained why it's really important and you've taken time to understand what it is that matters to them and what they're really great at, people are going to step up. And of course, most of the case, that's the case. People are going to step up to deliver. They care about performance and they care about people. I think that's a way of thinking about it. They want stuff to happen and they want people to feel great.
You know what? I love the way you say that. That is really good. And it's something I'm going to remember, because that is very key. But I think the bit that made me giggle when you said, they'd be really concerned about that. I thought that's probably the biggest understatement I've heard today.
Go on, tell me really how you put it.
Because, yes, they'll be very concerned, but they'll be very annoyed, because I think Mavericks are very much, if I say I can do it, I'll do it. If I say I will do it, I'll do it, because they're execution and output driven. So they want it done and they want to exceed your expectations when they're doing it. And they are very frustrated if someone says, "Oh, I can do this," and then they don't do it, and there's no real mitigation. Then they're quite angry.
Yeah. And I think they're sort of, although they're very good at getting people on board, and sometimes I think people from the outside will look and go, could that be a bit manipulative? That's not how it feels for them, and it's not how it feels for the people who are engaged with them. Actually, the opposite. I think my experience with seeing Socialised Mavericks at work is that when they're doing what they do, and they're doing what comes naturally, if they get a response that is unnecessarily political or game playing, it's a bit like a red rag to a bull for them, because that's not the game. That's not the game the way they play it. The game they play is, let's all get on and do some great stuff. And it's almost, I'd almost sort of say, and I'm speaking partly for myself here, it's sort of almost incomprehensible.
Because, if your default is to work for the greater good, then you kind of expect everybody to have, because why would that not be a good thing to do? And I think that's where the frustration can be.
Well, yeah. Now, what is interesting is when you put a socialised maverick into a situation where the cultures ended up being a bit, actually what then happens, I think, is something different, because they start to shift the way the game's played, because they're challenging it, because that's not how they want to play the game, and they know that that's not what's going to yield results, and they start to call out those unhelpful behaviours. And that's really important at a team level, and that's really important for teams working well together, because that then starts to pull in the other people who actually had just gone along with the stuff that was going on, and it starts to get them behaving better. And I always think, culture is one of these things that kind of, it ripples through one person at a time. If you've got something that you've got a helpful change going on in an organisation culture, once you start to get the ripple going, you get enough people moving in the direction that's
and I think that's
what the organisation. Yeah.
Many times I've been in an organisation where the manager ignores that socialised maverick because maybe they haven't got a leadership title, so they try to make something happen, and that maverick is sitting there going, no, it's not going to work, and they refuse to get on board with something that they see is pointless because it won't work. And it's not a point of they're trying to be overly challenging, because they would have tested each link in that causal path and then gone, no, it's not going to work. I can't be, and there are lots of challenging questions because they're trying to test out their own hypothesis, and they can be quite a big of a struggle because the manager thinks that the maverick is challenging them for the sake of challenging them, when they're not. In fact, they're not even that interested in what the manager has to say. That they're interested in the problem that it needs to be fixed. And I think that when organisations ignore those mavericks, they're crazy. They're causing themselves untold problems, because the maverick is more likely to be the most influential person in that room, and they can get the individuals to oscillate around themselves and their idea rather than the one that the company's trying to promote.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a story that I quite often tell about my early days working at the Body Shop. I was there for 14 years, but at the beginning, you couldn't get anything done through the formal structures. It was very chaotic. It was very creative. It was very innovative. That's a bit how Anita Roddick, who got the whole thing started, was herself. A lot. But it was a really fun place to work. And actually what really worked was it was seeded with socialised mavericks all over the place who would go and get stuff done by, you might say, just seeing the need for it, making stuff happen, and not asking for permission, but sort of sometimes seeking forgiveness afterwards. And it was a very exciting, very creative, very productive place. Of course, naturally what happens as those, and it was expanding very rapidly internationally. Of course, what happens naturally in those situations is, managers who haven't experienced that sort of energy and that sort of freedom of working will sometimes come in and go, oh, this looks a bit, hang on a second, who's in charge here?
Yeah.
And try to stifle it. And as they started to sort of stop the Socialised Mavericks doing what they were doing, it became a very, first of all, a very political culture. You know, you had to be in with the right people, and you could only get stuff done by being in with the right people, the opposite of what had been happening before. And then after that, it became quite a regulated, structured, process-driven set. And of course, unsurprisingly, all that creative energy sort of sapped away.
The Mavericks.
Yeah, they did. And they went off and, as you would do, if your way of working is to go and jump in, have a great time getting stuff done with great people and why not? If people are going, hang on a sec, you can't do that anymore, people go and find, people either stay there and be unhappy. They're not going to do that for very long if they're used to getting stuff done, because they care about getting stuff done. So they went hopping off into all sorts of places. They became influential in third sector organisations, big campaigning charities and so on. They became influential in other retailers. There was this great kind of diaspora of people going out who understood how to operate in this way, and doing amazing stuff. And of course, those people are still out there. It's a great network to be part of.
And I think, for me, that's where the
people.
paradox, the Maverick paradox lies. It's that people want Mavericks to change the world, and then when they do, they absolutely hate them for it. It's really bizarre. And I think it's, Mavericks get hired to make big changes. They're catalysts. They're not hired for evolutionary steps. They're hired for quantum leaps.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it starts to work and it reaches steady state or almost, steady state, then other people come and they want to control it. Like you said, what happened at the body shop, want to control that energy, and you can't. And I was just thinking there that it's because conformists don't think like Mavericks, and they don't trust that the Maverick, the Socialised Maverick who's been harnessing this weirdly energetic shape and everything's going fine, because they can't understand it and they can't really control it, because Socialised Mavericks aren't necessarily going to follow sort of hierarchical authority lines. They really try to take that control away, and I think that's what happens, and they just squish Socialised Mavericks to the point where they feel that they can no longer influence, and then they leave.
Yeah. And actually what was interesting in that situation, part of what started to happen, which kind of changed this for a while, and I think it's changing back now because they've recently had a change of ownership, is alongside the Socialised Mavericks, there were some people who were just out of control Mavericks. Big ego, wanted to kind of go and make stuff happen to make themselves look brilliant. And of course, people wanted to tie their hands. In the course of doing that, they tied other people's hands and put controls in place. Those controls needed to be in place, but they didn't need to be in place for everybody.
Yeah,
and in the course of doing that, they lost something. They probably had, what felt like a safer, more structured business, but it wasn't creating the huge waves that have been creating up to that point.
That people see Mavericks as all the same, and of course they're not. You have your socialised ones and you have your more extremes who will do things in a self-interested way. So rather than influence like a socialised Maverick, they'll be manipulative. And rather than working for the greater good, they're working for themselves. And that makes a huge, huge difference. And I think that's probably one of the reasons when you meet introverted people and you go, oh, that's an introverted Maverick, a socialised one. Although not all socialised Mavericks are introverted by a long way. People go, oh, he can't be a Maverick, because they're thinking of an extreme extroverted person. So they can miss the wonder and the ability of that introverted one. You think so?
Yeah, well, and I guess I wouldn't I? Every time I've ever done a test on introversion or extroversion, I've been
so
well
there you
on
go.
the
I've got an
introverted
introverted socialised maverick
side
on
of
the
the
call.
scale. I don't. I actually think that's been Susan Cain in her book Quiet, book about introversion, was about the power of introversion. It's really interesting on this. She talks about how quietly people who don't seem to be that sort of big and out there can get on and get all sorts of stuff done, sometimes a bit under the radar, because they're just getting on with quietly influencing people, understand what's going on. They tend to be very observant. Not sure if I am or not. My family would have a view on that. But because they operate in a different way, and they have this drive to make stuff happen and bring people along with them quietly.
Oh, I like that. I think that's a fantastic point to stop while we can ponder on the revolution. I like that. Patrick, thank you so much for bringing your introverted socialised maverickism to the podcast. I think you're the first introverted maverick, actually, we've had on. So thank you for that. Great energy. Will you come back again?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Speak to you soon. Bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Patrick as much as I have enjoyed having it. If you would like to learn more about Mavericks and leadership, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, apply to join the Maverick Paradox exclusive Facebook group, and my website is maverickparadox.com. So find out how willful independence can ultimately change all our futures. Thanks again, and see you soon.